Iran has emerged stronger diplomatically, strategically, militarily. Every way, Iran has emerged extremely stronger. There are no sanctions against Israel. There's no boycott of Israel. So it's still part of the international system. See, US is making a big deal about Iran's nuclear capabilities when Iran has always maintained that it was not interested in making a nuclear weapon. In recent times, UAE has also manufactured another threat from Iran, and that is a military threat. They say that Iran is in occupation of 3 UAE islands. Israel is in a very bad situation at the moment. And the reason I say this is not because Israel has lost this war very badly, and it is a nation, the most hated nation in the world right now. See, I think this is the MoU is the bare minimum that Iran would have accepted. And if you see a lot of Iranian experts who are talking about the MoU, they are saying that these were the conditions which Iran had even last year when they were talking. So this is the bare minimum they would accept. So I don't think from Iran's perspective they have given too many concessions to the US, because US has also recognized the fact that US is unable to continue with this war. So it has to give these concessions to Iran. I think the major concession that Iran has got at the moment is waiver of sanctions and unfreezing of Iranian assets. So something at the moment they're talking about something like $12 billion, which would be unfreezed by the US, of which at least 6 million will be made available to Qatar to buy agricultural food items from the US. So I think this is to start with, this is a big concession to Iran, because Iran obviously has suffered a lot in the last 3 months and even before that. So this would be a big support to Iran and Iranian society. The other big thing that has happened is it's in 2 parts. The first is the US recognition of Iran's sovereignty on the Strait of Hormuz. It finally accepts that yes, this is Iran's sovereign territory, sovereign waters, and also the US acceptance that after the 60-day period, Iran and Oman can work out an agreement on the passage of vessels from the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the US is underplaying the idea that they will levy a fee, whether there will be some tariff or taxes levied on the vessels, the ships which will transit the Strait of Hormuz. But from the Iran and Omani statements that have come out, and the joint statement which they released, they are talking about certain kinds of service charges which will be charged. So whether you call it a fee, a transit fee, whether you call it environment charge or whatever, some money will be charged from the vessels which will transit the Strait of Hormuz. This has been agreed between Iran and Oman, and they will gradually also speak to the other littoral states like Bahrain, like UAE, Qatar, which are also stakeholders in the Strait of Hormuz. So the US has accepted that these countries will eventually decide how the transportation of goods will happen from the Strait of Hormuz. So I think this is a big come down for the US. Now, as far as the other items on the MoU are concerned, things like access to Iranian nuclear sites. I was watching an interview of an Iranian expert, and he said that the sites which are in any case in public domain, where like Bushehr nuclear plant, where even the Russian scientists are present, they are open and anybody can come, and IAI can come and inspectors can come and inspect those sites. But the sites which were attacked by the US during the war, those will not be open at the moment to any outsiders, including IAI. So there is a bit of a confusion here, because the US is saying Iran has accepted inspection of the sites, but Iran is making a distinction between the sites.
Limited, yeah.
So we'll see how things go from here. See, the US is making a big deal about Iran's nuclear capabilities when Iran has always maintained that it was not interested in making a nuclear weapon.
Right.
It was never on the table. They never said that we have a right to make a nuclear weapon. So now to say that we have degraded Iran's capability to make nuclear weapons it's a statement which really means nothing, because Iran has never said that they want to make nuclear weapons. So now they are saying that they will degrade that. They will and they will bring it down. So Iran has accepted accepted that they will degrade that, because they are saying we are not interested in the weapon grade. So I don't know how things will unfold, because much depends upon how the conversation continues. They've had the first round, they have created the technical team, they have created the high powered committee. So let's see how this conversation goes forward. But one thing is certain, that Iran has accepted that it is not interested in nuclear weapons, and it is open to the idea of degrading its enriched uranium. So as far as that is concerned, that has been agreed to. See, Iran is also, Iran is actually looking beyond the war. If you see, Iranian President Pesheshkian was in Pakistan. Arachi has returned from Switzerland after these talks. Khalibaf is now going to China. They are talking, and then he went to Oman. They are actually looking at the post-war security architecture in West Asia. So they are already looking at a West Asia which is managed and governed by the local players, the local countries there, and so that the US interference in this region, the US influence in this region progressively reduces. So I don't think Iran would at this point want to be seen as a nuclear threat to its neighbors. It wants to project itself as a benign neighbor, a neighbor which is willing to work with everybody else. Iran's enriched uranium, 60% uranium, and its assertion of nuclear power will be viewed as a threat to the other neighbors, because they don't have the nuclear capability. See, Iran had been reaching out to its neighbors for a very long time. Now, I don't remember the year, but when Rouhani was the president of Iran, in his address to the UN, even there he had spoken about a regional security architecture, a regional security framework, and it was called, the acronym was HOPE. It was Hormuz Operation something and peace, something it was said. So acronym was HOPE. You can look it up what the full form of this was. So even there he was talking about that outside powers should not be allowed in this region, in the West Asian region, and the local and the regional countries should work on their own security architecture. They should have their own collective infrastructure, collective security system by which they can no longer pose threat to each other. So this was said then. Even during the war, in March, President Pesheshkian, when he did his televised address to the Iranian neighbors, he said something similar. He said that we should be responsible for our own security. So Iran has been making this outreach to its neighbors for a very long time. Unfortunately, the neighbors were not receptive to these ideas. I think primarily because they feared Iran exporting ideology to their countries, because Iran is a revolutionary state, and these are all monarchies or semi-monarchies. And the other reason was the presence of the US on their soils, the presence of US troops on their soils, and their dependence, complete dependence, economic and security dependence on the US, which came in the way of their opening dialogue with Iran. So this war has changed these dynamics, and I think this is a good development. Everything is reversible. It's just an MoU. Right. Unless they sign a peace deal or a proper agreement, everything is reversible, which is why even when the talks were happening during the MoU, Iranian delegation walked out because of the attacks in Lebanon. So nothing here is etched in stone. Not just strategically, I think Iran has emerged stronger diplomatically, strategically, militarily. Every way, Iran has emerged extremely stronger, and the consequence of this emergence of Iran as a strong power in West Asia are these peace talks that Qatar, Oman, Saudi, everybody is talking. See, except for the UAE, which is still a bit of an outlier, and Bahrain, everybody else is now on board talking with Iran. Now this R4, which Pakistan has created with Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia,
Right.
and Pakistan. This is also a consequence of the war and Iran's emergence as a very strong player in West Asia. In fact, the strongest player in West Asia. So it's a consequence of the war only. How much of an economic breather it has gained or it has got, it's still not very certain, because as I said, everything in the MoU, the sanction relief, the unfreezing of assets, everything is reversible. Hopefully they won't be reversed, and this will be a process which will continue. But every other way, Iran has come out on tops. And now, whether the economic breather comes from the US or not is not very sure, not very certain.
Why do you think so? Do you think US will not remain
See, the
committed?
US also has a lot of compulsions internally, which is why it is trying to domestic compulsion. So it is trying to direct the release of funds to the regional players. So Qatar will procure goods for Iran. So it is trying to work that out. But if there are bottlenecks there, so it may stall the process. But that is not the important thing. The important thing here is that Iran's risen stature in this region has ensured that whatever happens in West Asia, Iran will be a very definitive voice here. Iran will be the nation which will be shaping the politics of this region. That is for sure. So that itself will give it a lot of space to maneuver. That itself will accrue even long-term economic benefits, because now it will be doing business with, and it is already doing business with the two major powers, Russia and China. So it will progressively do business with other countries also. So I think that economic element will widen, whether it comes from the US or not, but otherwise also the situation will improve for Iran. Israel is in a very bad situation at the moment. And the reason I say this is not because Israel has lost this war very badly, and it is a nation, the most hated nation in the world right now. Israeli people are getting targeted outside Israel. Every day there is some report about a Israeli holidaymaker being
there
targeted.
was one from India press did cover it.
So this is so all of this is happening. But why Israel remains a spoiler here is because of it's because of the bad situation it is in right now. It is extremely desperate, and there is a bipartisan unanimity in Israel against their Zionist ideology, against their expansionist ideology. So it is not just Netanyahu who is behaving, or who is a person who wants to pursue the genocide against Palestine, or who wants to expand Israel's borders, northwards into Lebanon or into Syria. Even the opposition leader, the person called Yair Lapid, he also wants the same thing.
True.
So there is a unanimity. There is a sanction from the Israeli people for this kind of a behavior. So that is the reason why Israel remains a very dangerous player in this, because of this complete radicalization of their population. They have ground support from the Israeli people to do what they are doing. So in sheer desperation, they can spoil this entire peace talks which are going on. They can attack Lebanon once again. Even as we talk, the violence in Gaza continues, the settlements in West Bank continue. So all of this is happening. It's just that they no longer the Gaza is no longer making news. Yesterday, the UN report has come out. But all of this, despite all of this, no costs have been imposed internationally on Israel. It's only the public opinion which has turned against Israel. So it's people across the world, they are talking against Israeli regime. But there are no sanctions against Israel. There's no boycott of Israel. So it's still part of the international system. Because US is desperate to see the MoU succeed into a peace agreement.
Right.
So and when Israel is trying to stymie that, Israel is trying to be a spoiler, so they have rebuked Israel harshly. They have warned Israel that they will withdraw US support from Israel. But it's just a warning. But there is, just as there is a bipartisan approach in Israel towards genocide, there is a bipartisan consensus in the US for support of Israel. So right now they are, because of the circumstances imposed by this war, they are desperate for an agreement. They don't want to continue the war against Iran. So they have issued these statements. But how far they will see it through, will they actually stop support to Israel? Will they actually pull back from Israel? We don't know, and it's difficult to say that. I don't think there is anything to do with ideology at all. It is all because Israel, until Iran has, after this war, has emerged as a very powerful player. Israel was the most powerful player in this region. Even a nation like Saudi Arabia, which draws its strength not only because of the American help and American military power, but also as being the custodian of two holy mosques and the worldwide Muslim sentiment which is hooked onto Saudi Arabia. Despite that, Saudi has been a very meek nation. So Israel was the country which was determining the contours of politics in West Asia. Israel got the US to force the countries to sign the Abraham Accords, which are now obviously in the dustbin. But one of the countries, they were making the outreach. The earliest outreach was made to Saudi Arabia, and Saudi was talking to Israelis about a rapprochement and some kind of a bilateral agreement, but at the last minute they deterred, and so they did not sign on it. But the fact of the matter is that until this war happened and Iran emerged as a major power, the power which was determining the course of this entire region was Israel.
Right.
So that is now threatened. Now Israel is actually not even on the peace talk table. It is not there. Its perspective or its viewpoint is not being taken into account. So it is completely left out. Whatever talks are happening, whether it's between US or Iran, whether it's between Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, or the recently, I think yesterday, Saudi hosted a peace discussion. Israel is out of all of them. So it is now almost like a power which is not in the reckoning in the regions where the region's future is being discussed. UAE, for some reason, because it is very close to Iran, has felt very threatened by Iran. And UAE is a autocratic regime.
Right.
There is, and they have feared for a very long time that some sort of a revolution will happen in the UAE also, because of its proximity to Iran, that Iran may export that sort of an ideology, not the Shia ideology, but the ideology of revolution, rousing the people against the regime.
Right.
So UAE has been very worried and wary of Iran. Even when President Rouhani had offered this option of collective security, regional security framework, one of the two countries which did not want to even discuss it, forget about rejecting, they did not reject it. I mean, they did not discuss it. So UAE and Bahrain were the two countries because because of their proximity to Iran. So they have always been very scared of Iran. In recent times, UAE has also manufactured another threat from Iran, and that is a military threat. They say that Iran is an occupation of 3 UAE islands.
Right.
So that is why Iran is a military threat to UAE, because it is an occupation of Iranian UAE territory. Iran says that these islands were Iranian territory for ages. Similarly, Bahrain has a territorial dispute. So that was the reason that these countries were not happy with Iran being a powerful nation, and their security was entirely dependent upon the US. When the US said that you have good ties with Israel because this is important to us, so they immediately jumped and had signed this agreement and improved their ties with Israel. Since then, Israeli investments in the UAE has increased, and UAE's investment in Israel has increased. So there's a lot of economic interdependence now. There are a lot of companies which have joint holding of the UAE state, the monarchy, as well as the Israeli business. So they have a lot of money is locked in between the two. When you have a discord with somebody, then you are always trying to undermine that person. Iran had Iran supported this Ansarul Islam group in which are Houthis in Yemen. So obviously Saudi and UAE were opposed to that, and then Saudi and UAE also had a problem, so they started opposing each other, the rival groups. The same has been happening in Somalia. But these were the consequences of underlying rivalry between the two nations.
Right.
So if they were doing this, they were doing to undermine each other's interests. Also, I think UAE's interest in Somalia also had to do with its relations with Israel, because Israel was also interested in Somalia and pacifying Somalia, which is why if you see, Somaliland was one of the countries which, yes. So the politics here has been extremely murky, but driven largely because of the hostility to Iran. Until they sign this agreement, I think it will be premature to say it is resolved. But it looks like that there is a wider consensus on it now. He should. I mean, he's been invited personally by the Iranian president. So ideally he should go, but I don't think he will go because it's a complete antithesis of India's foreign policy. The government of India took 3 days to even express condolence. So it's very unlikely that the Prime Minister will go for the funeral. See, from my perspective, I think this is not a good move for India and India's strategic and security and economic interests. I think it is not a good move. But the government's thinking is that it has to align itself very, very closely with the West, and which is why the Prime Minister had gone for the G7 also. So the present dispensation, the government of India's foreign policy is completely hitched to the Western countries, as opposed to our region. So it's almost like we have supplanted ourselves from this region and planted ourselves there. So that is the reason why I think he will not go for the funeral. Why I think he should accept the invitation and go for the funeral is because we not only belong to this region, but this region is now emerging increasingly as the center of global affairs. This is the region where it's not just Iran. You would see the larger region, the larger Eurasian region, which is Russia, Central Asia, China, India, Pakistan, most of West Asia, Southeast Asia. This entire thing is where the bulk of economic activity is happening. This is the biggest economic bloc in the world. The GDP of this region is the largest in the world. So every which way, this is an important region, and any development which is happening in this region, we should be part of that development. We should not only be a player in that development, only because after that, once we are player in this development, can we benefit from the consequences of those developments. So I think we should look at, we should review our foreign policy, we should look at our neighborhood, we should before looking at Europe or before looking at the US, this is our neighborhood, this is where we should have focused on. Failure would be end of talks. The end of talks, the stage between the MoU and the peace agreement.
Days.
So the end of talks would constitute a failure. But will this failure be a huge setback to Iran is something I am not very sure about. I do not think it will be a huge setback for Iran because a lot of other things have been set in motion which were not there earlier, before February 28th.
Right.
So these developments will continue moving forward. Iran's conversation with its neighbors, with Oman, now with Qatar, Pakistan's close involvement in this region, as it's a military agreement with Saudi Arabia, most probably with Qatar as well. This creation of R4, the group of Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey and Saudi Arabia. All of these developments and the role of China and Russia in this region, all of this has set in motion developments which will not stop after, even if the peace talks are not successful. So it's very important that these peace talks succeed, because that will really lift a huge weight of Iran. The sanction relief will be a big relief for Iran, Iran's economy, for Iranian people. So all of that should happen. But even if it doesn't happen, if something goes wrong, wrong on the way, other things will happen.